So we had some big breaking news that came out yesterday, guys. There was a big report in the New York Times which talked about how Israel was warned in detail about the October 7th attack that happened. And basically, they smugly dismissed it in as absurd a fashion you could possibly imagine.
Yeah. So New York Times had a bombshell report that more than a year before October 7th, they got their hands on detailed plans for how this was all going to unfold, including where they were going to attack first, how many people were going to be involved, the paragliders that they end up using. And they were so arrogant and dismissive about, I think, any sort of Palestinian capabilities that they're like, well, this is just aspirational. Like, this isn't real. But it's not just that. And again, this was detailed. Like, it ended up being very close to what actually unfolded on October 7th. There's also at least one analyst who was watching, spying within the Gaza Strip and watching Hamas train for exactly what was laid out in this document. And it was a woman. She's going to her superior saying, like, no, they're really planning this. I'm watching them practice for it. And it's very similar to what's in this document. And once again, no, they can't pull that off. It's just aspirational. This is a wish of the capabilities they want to have, but they're nowhere close to being able to pull this off. And so, I think it speaks to an incredible level of arrogance, both in their own capabilities vis-a-vis, Hamas and Palestinians in general. I think it also speaks to a level of complacency given the reliance on the tech that they had, these remote controlled machine guns pointed in at the Gaza Strip and all of their high-tech fence and all of this stuff that led them to just completely discard what was being planned right in front of their faces. It's extraordinary.
They were told they're going to hit this specific point of the wall. They're going to hit this specific point of the wall. They're going to use GPS blockers during the attack. They're going to go after the surveillance capabilities. It was laid out in extreme detail, and the reaction from the higher-ups was just like, nah, we don't think so. And so the unit that gathered the intelligence and shared it, they were like basically going crazy, like, we're watching them practice for this, and they were like, nah, we don't think it's going to happen.
They even invoked the Yom Kippur War as we got caught flat-footed before. We got caught with our pants down before. We don't want this to happen again. Using the most aggressive language they possibly could. And, it's, so when you put this in the domestic political context for Israel, Netanyahu already is at 8% of people who want him to be in office. The more that comes out about the incredible failures here, I think the more likely it is that he's going to be forced out of office. The other thing that's worth pointing out, which came out immediately, is part of why that part of Israel was so poorly guarded and why people for hours were left to themselves to defend themselves against these attacks was because so many of the troops had been moved to the West Bank to protect these psycho rampaging settlers.
And Hamas knew that. That was part of why they attacked, because they knew it was going to happen.
And so, and this was something that, the fringe psychos in Netanyahu's coalition wanted him to do and push for. And the people who were left exposed actually tend to be sort of more moderate, more liberal on the political spectrum. So they felt like, you're ignoring us because we're not on your political team. And that's the other piece that contributes to the incredible vulnerability on that day.
Now, by the way, the intelligence officials who were warning about this, it was all females.
Right.
And so there seems to be an element of these wacky broads are saying, whatever.
Yeah,
we don't believe it. We don't believe it.
They're just so emotional. We can't trust them.
And you can't help but make the comparison to the very famous Bin Laden determined to attack within the U.S. memo that Bush ignored. But the difference is there actually were far fewer details in the Bin Laden determined to attack within the U.S. memo, versus all the details that were in this thing. I mean, they laid out, we know, it's super clear how they're going to attack and that they're going to do it.
Here's the base they're going to overrun. Here's how they're going to disable our tech. I mean, here they're going to use paragliders was even in there, all of that. And then they're watching them train to execute the plan that they already have in front of them. And nothing. And
so now, there's two potential options, right? It's the total rank incompetence. That's the one option. And the other option is, and this is going to fuel it, the conspiracy theorists who would say, Netanyahu wanted them to attack.
Yeah.
He wanted them to attack because he wanted to justify and verify a reaction that does ethnic cleansing. Well, either way, there are no good options there, right? Because if it's not that, it is just rank incompetence. And remember, we've been talking about this quite a bit. Even as late as 2019, you have Netanyahu on video propping up Hamas, saying we need to fund Hamas and prop them up because they look crazy, and so we get to turn around and tell the international community, I don't know why you want us to negotiate a peace agreement. These people are terrorists. These people are crazy. We can't negotiate a peace agreement. We can't negotiate a Palestinian state with them. So it was part of his strategy to prop them up as much as humanly possible.
Right, and may well continue to be. I mean, he had this idea that, we'll control the height of the flames, right? And we'll pretend as if the Palestinians don't even exist anymore, and we'll just go and make these other deals. And
the Abraham Accords, right?
Yeah, the Abraham Accords, normalization they're working on with Saudi Arabia. And, obviously this pierced his theory of how this was all going to unfold. But it is a stunning level of arrogance. The reason why I am very skeptical of the idea that this was some sort of effectively a false flag where they let it happen is because Netanyahu is very ideological, but the first and foremost thing he cares about is his own power. And for him politically, this has been an absolute disaster. And he's not such an idiot that he wouldn't realize that it would be an absolute disaster.
And he's Mr. Security. That's
Mr.
his whole
Security.
thing, yeah.
That was what he was called. So you can't let, this horrific attack occur on your watch and think that this is going to inure to your political benefit. So that's why I'm skeptical of the idea that it's a false flag. Now, what do we know that all sorts of, nefarious leaders do in times of crisis? They then use the crisis to be able to achieve whatever their ends and goals are. So is that happening now where he's using this to try to effectuate what he and his party and his coalition allies want, which is a total ethnic cleansing and to be done with the Gaza Strip forever? Yeah, they're obviously clearly pushing that. Will they succeed? That's another question. But is that the end goal? Is that their ideal outcome? 100%. I don't think anyone can deny that.
And by the way, truce is up. And they're immediately back to bombing. They are immediately back to bombing, and they've already had dozens of new deaths.
Right.
It's ugly, man, because they were saying after this truce, we're going to go back to what we were doing before. If anything, we're going to step it up.
Right. And remember, basically, almost everybody's been pushed out of the north, forcibly displaced from Gaza City. The overwhelming majority of Palestinians in Gaza at this point have been forcibly displaced, clustered in the south. And this morning, I saw leaflets being dropped in Khan Yunis, which is the city in the south, where they said, after Al-Shifa, after they said that was the Hamas HQ, now they're saying Khan Yunis is the Hamas HQ. This is one of the cities that people fled to because they were told they had to flee from the north. And now they're leafleting this area saying you better get the hell out or else you're going to be considered a target.
And for all of the Palestinian political prisoners who were released by Israel in this deal, they've now taken more Palestinian political prisoners from the West Bank.
Right.
That's what the reporting is.
Right.
So, I mean, it's sick, it's bad, but this is huge news. But, is it going to change the U.S.'s posture one iota? Unfortunately, it's unlikely.